have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm the recovering Ann Northrup.
Welcome back, Ann. Did you have a happy birthday?
I did have a happy birthday, and I had a happy time watching you guys do the show live last week. Thank you very much, Corey Johnson, for sitting in. I have clawed my way back to this seat. Feeling a little better, but not entirely. So I am hoping to make it through this hour.
Because we got a lot of news. Starting with the fact that Vice President Joe Biden is, quote, absolutely comfortable, unquote, with same-sex marriage, but the Obama campaign is not absolutely comfortable with his statement.
We could spend the whole show on this, but we'll attempt to edit ourselves a little. Meanwhile, the real confrontation will come next week when President Obama has to face Freedom to Marry's Evan Wolfson at the Barnard College graduation.
Speaking of Obama, his education secretary, Arne Duncan, did come out for same-sex marriage.
In spite of the stupid way the question was asked.
Please, yes.
We'll get to that, too. I thought we'd be headlining this week the resignation of Mitt Romney's press rep, Richard Grenell. That, of course, has fallen to second place, but we'll get to that, too.
The North Carolina vote, we're taping on Tuesday when they're voting. It doesn't look good, but we hope we're wrong.
Stranger things have happened in Mississippi, but we'll discuss a lot of the stuff around the North Carolina
What happened
vote.
in Mississippi?
The personhood vote,
Oh, right.
which was, we were supposed to lose big, and to everyone's surprise, we won. Very sad to mourn the passing of Maurice Sendak this week, the out gay author and illustrator of children's books. Came out late in life, died at 83.
We're interested to know whether the new socialist president of France is going to be able to bring about same-sex marriage in that country.
A terrible story from Honduras, where a leading gay activist has been murdered.
Mm-hmm. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, makes a plea for LGBT rights in advance of the International Day against homophobia and transphobia, by the way, they're calling it this year. We're going to show you her rather stirring address.
Terrible story from the Obama administration Health and Human Services Department. They have okayed federal funding for an awful right-wing abstinence-only sex ed program.
Don't do it. And I'm going to review.
Too late.
I'm going to review. Well, we can take it back. I'm going to review Jonathan Pryce in Harold Pinter's The Caretaker out at BAM, Matthew Broderick in Nice Work If You Can Get It. And I guess I don't have to talk about Leap of Faith because it's closing on Sunday.
Okay. But we will talk about whether Queen Latifah has finally come out of the closet.
A monarch?
Exactly.
All right.
Royalty.
Well, we start with the fact that, there's a headline in the Times that says Biden backs same-sex marriage. But
Well, before we get to the substance of this, I want to take a minute to rant about the press. NBC taped this interview with Joe Biden 2 days earlier on Friday and did absolutely nothing with it. If they had an interview with anybody else that was breaking news, we would have seen press releases from NBC. We would have seen promotional clips on their news shows.
Why do you mean
nothing.
with nobody else? Why didn't
Or
they
with
do
him.
that? Why don't you think they did that?
Because the press is stupid and does not understand the news value of this conversation. They have not adequately covered this whole issue for years.
They don't understand it.
They do not understand it. They do not understand its significance. They don't understand us. They don't understand anything.
Well,
and NBC was the epitome of this in starting this story in the first place.
Ann Northrup brought my attention to the fact that when the New York Times was talking about this whole thing, this whole rigmarole with where's Obama on same-sex marriage, they don't quote Axelrod saying this, but they say that the administration has quit enforcing a federal law against same-sex marriage, which isn't true, of course. What the Obama administration has done is that they won't defend it in court. In fact, they say it's unconstitutional and they want it to be overturned.
But they very specifically have made clear again and again and again that they are continuing to enforce it because it is the law. Yes, they look for loopholes, but where they must, they enforce it. And the idea, and this gets repeated in the press all over the place by opponents, that he is not enforcing the Defense of Marriage Act.
And then there's also a problem with the way our community, quote-unquote, leaders, or the people who occupy these positions and get themselves on television, have been talking about this. I mean, you get a guy like Joe Salmonese from the Human Rights Campaign going on about Biden and saying, there's no doubt, about Obama, there's no doubt in my mind that the president shares these values, and that's why it's time for him to speak out in favor of marriage equality. There's no doubt in my mind that he shares these values. Well, you know, the president has consistently said, I do not support same-sex marriage. I support all the rights.
He hasn't said any of it for a long time because the press has not asked him about it. They have all these press availabilities with him, press conferences, whatever, individual interviews. They don't ask him about it.
How many times do I have to tell you that I'm evolving on this issue? I struggle with it.
I don't think he's been asked about it in at least a year. And I think the only reason that Biden made news was because Sunday morning, when this started to break, that he said this, the gay press and bloggers started talking about it among themselves online, and that's when the mainstream press realized, oh, this is news, and then it took off, and then they finally got on board by Monday at the White House press briefing and started hammering the White House press spokesman. And also Axelrod
jumped in.
Emailing in to Chuck Todd while Meet the Press was on the air. And why didn't he know about it 2 days before when Biden recorded the interview?
There was all this talk, because we have all these MSNBC and all these other talk shows, especially a guy like Lawrence O'Donnell saying, oh, all of this is orchestrated. They know exactly what they're going to say. You never know what Joe Biden is going to say.
Well,
and it was typical Biden. I think people can make their judgments
They didn't even know what he was going to say. They orchestrated. They don't know the issue.
Right.
Ridiculous to think this is orchestrated.
Then to think that the Arnie Duncan thing was orchestrated because the next day Arnie Duncan, we might as well jump to it for a second and we're going to show Biden. Arnie Duncan was just asked not a very straightforward question by an idiot named Mark Halperin.
Here was the question.
Yeah.
Do you think same-sex men and women... Same-sex men and women. What, pray tell, are same-sex men and women? Do you think same-sex men and women should be allowed to marry?
So Arnie Duncan said absolutely, but maybe we don't know what he was referring to.
Oh, no, wait a minute. Wait, when the question is asked, Mark, because I saw this finally, Mark Halperin says, do you think same-sex men and women should be allowed to marry? The next thing you hear is Mika Brzezinski going, oh, no, you're not going to start with that, are you?
Right. Yeah, I heard it in the background, too. Well, Mark is an idiot. She's not much better.
Oh, she's the bigger idiot. But at least he said we're now going to go after every member of the cabinet on this.
Yeah.
Oh, you're finally going to ask the question?
Where's the poll?
Jesus.
I was looking for a poll of the cabinet.
Oh, my God.
We would do it, too, but we're volunteers here, We hope that you'll
They won't talk to us. But the president may have to talk to Evan Wolfson on Monday. All right, so all this is about Biden. So for those of you who have not seen what Biden actually said...
in its entirety.
We will bring it to you now.
Look, I just think that the good news is that as more and more Americans come to understand what this is all about is a simple proposition. Who do you love? Who do you love? And will you be loyal to the person you love? And that's what people are finding out is what all marriages at their root are about. Whether they're marriages of lesbians or gay men or heterosexuals.
Is that what you believe now?
That's what I believe.
And you're comfortable with same-sex marriage now?
Look, I am Vice President of the United States of America. The President sets the policy. I am absolutely comfortable with the fact that men marrying men, women marrying women, and heterosexual men and women marrying women are entitled to the same exact rights, all the civil rights, all the civil liberties. And quite frankly, I don't see much of a distinction beyond that.
In a second term, will this administration come out behind same-sex marriage, the institution of marriage?
I can't speak to that. I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you.
It sounds like you'd like to see it happen if that's where the president would get to.
The president continues to fight, whether it's don't ask, don't tell, or whether it is making sure across the board that you cannot discriminate. Look at the executive orders he's put in place. Any hospital that gets federal funding, which is almost all of them, they can't deny a partner from being able to have access to their partner's will or making the call on whether or not they, it's just, this is evolving. And by the way, my measure, David, and I take a look at when things really begin to change, is when the social culture changes. I think Will and Grace probably did more to educate the American public than almost anything anybody's ever done so far. And I think that people fear that which is different. Now they're beginning to understand. They're beginning to understand that this as a base. I was speaking to a group of gay leaders in Los Angeles two weeks ago. And one gentleman looked at me in the question period and said, "Let me ask you, how do you feel about us?" And I had just walked into the back door of this gay couple, and there were their 2 adopted children. And I turned to the man who owned the house. I said, "What did I do when I walked in?" He said, "You walked right to my children. They were 7 and 5 and giving you flowers." And I said, "I wish every American could see the look of love those kids had in their eyes for you guys, and they wouldn't have any doubt about what this is about."
Look, I don't think anything he said is inconsistent with what the administration has said and done.
And a lot of activists were engaging in wishful thinking, and saying, "Oh, this is a breakthrough," or this is the administration testing the waters and all this other kind of stuff. Right, it is idiocy. But here's the thing.
Of course, referring to Will and Grace as the great breakthrough is
Wait a minute.
idiocy.
It's not Will and Grace. It's Andy and Ann. We've been on for 26 years, for God's sakes. Not Will and Grace. If anything, it was Ellen or something. It's 1,000 things. It's all of you out there who have done this.
Exactly.
We're all doing this together.
Although evidently Joe has just figured out that some of us have children.
Well, but then there's analysis that said, "Oh, this is Biden moving himself to the left on this issue for 2016. He has to get ahead because the party is for this." Well, there is all this stuff about let's put a plank in the platform in this year, which could actually lead to a platform fight in Charlotte, North Carolina, at the Democratic Convention.
They would be.
Caroline Kennedy is for it now.
Insane. Bill Clinton's making robocalls in North Carolina. More on that later. Insane to have a fight over that. If they've got a vote to do it, ignore it. No one's going to pay attention. The press won't care. They won't understand it.
And then
let it go.
And then Anderson Cooper had to come on television to tell us, "Hey, Obama doesn't support equal rights for gay couples." Anderson, I got to say something to you. Screw you.
Yeah.
You don't have the courage to even say that you're gay, and when you talk about everything else in your personal life, and you're telling the President of the United States what he should be doing.
Crazy.
And
Awful.
look, do I wish Obama would just say it? Sure. Do I think it'd be a problem? I don't think so.
Well, I think it's like what we used to say about Vietnam, and having had yet another birthday, I am old enough to remember this. People used to say, look, the strategy for getting out is declare victory and leave.
Well.
And given that he is in court arguing that DOMA is unconstitutional, he comes out against all these state constitutional amendments. He is clearly doing everything he can to support same-sex couples, married or not. Why not just assume and state that we have one?
And quite frankly, you know, I'd like him to come out on a lot of other things, like getting out of the wars and closing Guantanamo and improving the civil liberties situation in the United States, which has worsened under him.
A lot of things he's a lot worse on.
I'm voting for him.
Well, before we get to Romney, let's just clean up the last few details. Arne Duncan, Secretary of Education, did forthrightly come out for same-sex marriage on Morning Joe on MSNBC.
Yes, Romney's going to get rid of the education department. I don't even know if that's true.
Is that why? And HUD Secretary Sean Donovan was the first cabinet member to explicitly come out for same-sex marriage in November.
And this business about Evan Wolfson, who's the head of Freedom to Marry and the founder of it, he is receiving Barnard College's Medal of Distinction alongside President Obama. And he says, when I get the chance to whisper in the president's ear, I'm going to thank him for the steps he's already taken and applaud him and blah, 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 and he's going to,
Do you think the press will pick up on this and realize that Obama is on the same stage with Evan Wolfson and that this might be an advance on the story?
If it was Dan Savage up there, it might be interesting.
Well, I truly did think that our headline this week, although this happened a week ago, was going to be Romney and Richard Grenell.
Richard Grenell was appointed a couple of weeks ago as the foreign policy spokesperson
and national security
for the Romney campaign. And he has experience working for John Bolton at the
Richard
UN.
Grenell is a pig.
We talked about him a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, when he was first appointed. He's an out gay man whose good thing when he was working at the UN was insisting that his partner be listed in the staff directory, which I'm not sure they ever did.
He sounds like a gay activist who's for same-sex marriage.
Well, that's what the right wing thinks. But meanwhile, he's a real right-winger. He tweets all the time mean stuff about everyone from
Rachel Maddow to
Callista Gingrich. He's an equal opportunity offender.
Right.
But for some reason, Romney appointed him as his spokesman on... And
Romney had gay staff in Massachusetts and I think appointed some gay judges.
Yeah, this guy's a little outrageous.
So it was really actually the ones who were speaking up about this were the far right. And
I love the guy from the National Review who said, well, if Obama comes out for marriage, then Grenell is just going to jump to him.
Yeah, right. He doesn't understand these gay Republicans.
Wow.
So Grenell, look, officially Grenell pulled himself back. But what happened was, he hadn't officially come on board, but he was starting to arrange calls around foreign policy and things like that. He would arrange the calls and then they wouldn't let him in on the call. So he realized he was being iced out, or they were just waiting for it all to sort of calm down,
well, that's
or whatever.
What they said.
Their story is, we begged him to stay.
Everyone but the candidate begged him to stay.
Well, Romney says, he was a capable individual. We're sorry to have him go. This is Romney. And a whole series of senior people on my team and my supporters called him and encouraged him to stay. But you want to be the commander-in-chief, Mitt. You got to say, nope, we're going to tough this out. This is going to be my sister soldier movement with the right wing. But no. Brian Fisher is this extreme right-wing preacher who was one of the guys on this case.
He runs the American Family Association. He's the one who is always calling for boycotts of JCPenney because they support Ellen. Or, he's taken over from Don Wildman
So
there.
on his show, he was taking a victory lap on this, and we're going to show you that for the next minute 30.
This is huge, ladies and gentlemen. This is absolutely huge that a homosexual activist in a very prominent place in Mitt Romney's campaign has stepped down. He has resigned, and it's very clear from the Washington Post that he resigned because of pressure that was put on the Romney campaign by the pro-family community. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a huge win, and it's a huge win for us in regard to Mitt Romney, because Mitt Romney has been forced to say, look, I overstepped my bounds here. I went outside the parameters here. I went off the reservation with this hire. Pro-family community has called me back to the table here, called me back inside the borders of the reservation. Now, Mitt Romney's not going to admit that. I guarantee you he's not going to admit. But that, ladies, that is exactly what happened. This is a huge win for the pro-family community. And what this means now And here's why it's important that we took Romney on this deal. This is why it's important that we did this. You know, Tony Perkins came out and agreed with me this was problematic. Gary Bauer came out and agreed with me this was a problematic hire. You know, we were virtually lone voices in the wilderness, but evidently the energy was building. And here's what's important. This is why it was important that I take Governor Romney on, that we as the pro-family community take Governor Romney on, is I will flat out guarantee you he is not going to make this mistake again. There is no way in the world that Mitt Romney is going to put a homosexual activist in any position of importance in his campaign.
Well, I don't think this guy has watched Will and Grace or met those little children who were that Biden met, because he would never talk like that if he did about our families.
I just adore that piece of tape. I think that is so great.
But the follow-up this week
Yes.
is that he says, Romney's a wimp for giving in to me. What kind of character does he have if he folds when we attack him?
Well, the idea that the stupid press, which I can see is going to be my theme tonight, keeps saying...
Present company excluded. Thank you.
And myself, too. The fact that they keep saying, oh, Romney will now go to the center. We can see it already. You know, he's just flipping everything, and he's really becoming a centrist. This is the real thing. This is what he's doing. And then you have Grover Norquist standing up and saying, oh, we don't even need a breathing president. All we need him to do is robo-sign the bills that we write. How can anyone vote for this guy?
Well, you know, we're going to talk about the elections in France. You know, Sarkozy lost. But, you know, whether you're a right-winger or a left-winger, basically you've been losing lately. People, when things are bad, people vote change.
Tell me about it. 2 years ago.
They don't think about it again. Well, those were our midterm elections.
Yeah.
And that's a little different because you all out there, let me explain something, and I'm not trying to, you know, but midterm elections are kind of more important because there's no presidential thing on the ballot and you're electing a Congress that's going to do things. But when people turn out for president, even in states where it doesn't matter what they do, they end up voting for Democrats in Congress, and that's helpful to us.
I got one more little sidebar on Romney that is under my skin, and that is his son, Tag, who has now celebrated the birth of his twins, his 5th and 6th children. Children 4, 5, and 6 were born to a surrogate. Now, the right-wing Republicans do not supposedly like anything other than natural procreation.
Mormonism doesn't care. Catholic Church, he would have to lose his position, his teaching position,
He
if he
already
did that.
has 3 kids. What is going on here?
Well, he's doing God's will.
Oh, my God. God's will is for him to hire a surrogate to give birth to 3 more kids? I think that's going a little above and beyond.
Okay.
But what do I know?
All right.
All right, so we're going to move on to North Carolina, which, you know, there was a time when we thought, oh, we have a real chance of winning this.
I hope we're sitting here and you're celebrating the victory in North Carolina, but we're taping on Tuesday and the polls didn't look good. But, you know, the head of the NAACP, the Reverend William Barber, the second came out there and gave a stirring speech against this thing and said this isn't about marriage. This is about putting discrimination into the Constitution. This is the kind of stuff that was done against us when they banned interracial marriage in this state. That kind of stuff. It was very powerful.
Yeah.
There were a lot of African American.
Do you want majorities voting on minority rights? But look, we see a blog post by a guy who went down there, a gay guy, to work on the campaign the last few days, and he comes back and he says, you know, I was coming through the airport and I was wearing a T-shirt that said, vote no on Amendment 1. And 3 Homeland Security people said to me, what's Amendment 1?
Well, it's They are doing it in May here. They're not doing it at least in November.
Well, it's a primary election. And first it was going to be the Republican primary, and we thought that was going to bring out all the Republican voters, and we were really screwed. And then that became less important, and they have a primary among the Democrats for governor, and so we thought that would play for us.
Purdue.
But in the end...
Well, look, first of all, same-sex marriage is already banned in North Carolina. This is, if it passed, it's going to make it a lot worse because it bans it says that, the only domestic union we recognize is a marriage between a man and a woman, which is going to hurt all kinds of domestic partnerships of all kinds.
Including disproportionately the African American population, because the marriage rates are lower. So you have more unmarried couples who will be disproportionately affected by this because they will lose all rights.
Well, there is some good news. The guy we showed you last week who shot up a no amendment on Amendment 1 sign, fired into it. He is being looked into.
Turns out he was a 17-year-old boy.
Yeah,
he looked about 35, but he was 17, and he stole that sign from another location, brought it to his yard, and then claimed it was put up on his property and shot it with the shotgun.
So he's being investigated for misuse of firearms and other charges.
Yeah, and the cops responded quite heavily, concerned about whether he would take his shotgun and go hurt someone. Right. A couple of shocking stories in North Carolina. First of all, the North Carolina representative, Jim Crawford, who sponsored Amendment 1 in the legislature, announced that he would vote against it because the final version went too far, because it does take away rights from any domestic partnership.
Well, that was another thing that Reverend Barber was bringing up, was who the hell wrote this? They didn't even have legal people looking at this language to write it.
We do know who wrote it, and it was legal people. The Alliance Defense Fund, the right-wing legal group that goes against us in every court case, wrote this amendment and demanded that it be broader than the original version.
Where was the National Organization for Marriage on this? They said that they support civil unions now.
Oh, please. Smokescreen. And then there are stories early on in the voting today, as we are taping, that there is fraud going on, that in liberal cities in North Carolina, there is election fraud. Here's the deal.
It's very complicated. Focus on this.
Pay attention. If you are 17 years old in North Carolina, like the guy who shot up the sign,
you can vote in state. You can vote in state elections.
You can vote in primaries in May if you will be 18 by the time of the election in November. But only for candidates. You cannot vote on amendments.
Right.
So 17-year-olds are supposed to be given ballots that do not include the amendment. Fine, that's what's happening. But in liberal cities, reports are that adult voters are being given ballots without the amendment on it.
That sounds like a dirty trick.
It sounds like a very dirty trick, and the idea is that those are the places which would be most likely to vote against the amendment, and so this is an attempt to diminish the vote against the amendment.
And there was another North Carolina preacher down there who was talking about cracking the wrists of effeminate children. If a child expresses any kind of, a boy expresses any kind of effeminacy, crack his wrist. He actually went on Signorelli's show to talk about it and tried to act like, oh, well, I didn't really mean that. Just like Jesus didn't really mean for you to cut your hand off. He was just speaking metaphorically.
Oh, please. Bill Clinton and Chelsea Clinton came out publicly against Amendment 1 in robocalls and letters. Billy Graham, 93 years old.
I didn't even know he was alive.
Neither did I, and I have some suspicion that he's not compos mentis enough to have done this, but I don't know that for a fact. I know he's been sick lately.
Well, it would have been news.
It
would have been news if he came out against it.
He came out for it in full-page ads.
Of course.
But I suspect that was engineered. You just mentioned this Sean Harris, the preacher at the Berean Baptist Church, who was preaching that boys should be punched if they are at all effeminate.
He doesn't like girls being too butch either.
I want to just run down a couple of other religion-related stories here. The Southern Baptist Convention president says the idea that you can't change homosexuals is a big lie of the devil.
Yeah, you can break their wrists.
And it's like Nazi propaganda because God says it's evil, and if you say different, then you are a Nazi. The United Methodists voted to retain their precept that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. This seems to be in line with what's happening in the Anglican Church, that more and more of the Methodist Church, which is the largest Protestant denomination, is international and is more right-wing conservative.
Because the new folks have the zeal of the converted. They actually take the religion seriously.
Well, in attempting to expand these churches, which are dying or diminishing in the United States, they're reaching out around the world, and what they're sweeping in are a much more conservative
I think we
group.
got 39% of the vote in that Methodist thing.
Yes, and there were gay activists who interrupted the session by singing, which closed it down, but not before they voted against us. And good news, Exodus International, which is the whole ex-gay operation, has canceled its next Love One Out conference in Albuquerque because of lack of interest, which is very good news. We are, as we say, taping on Tuesday, awaiting word on North Carolina, pessimistic, but hoping for a miracle.
Hoping for the same in Colorado, which
Yes.
is very, very close there on a civil unions bill. There are enough votes to pass it in the House, but the House is led by a Republican who doesn't like the idea. So...
And may single-handedly hold it up. A few Republican votes got it passed through a couple of committees.
Well, our friend Christine Quinn, who's the Speaker of the Council here, who's getting married in a couple of weeks. I mean, she's the Speaker. She's held up bills that she doesn't like, you know,
but this
sick
is the
leave and things
state
like
House
that.
of Representatives.
You know. I'm
Yeah,
just
well,
saying,
they do it here,
leaders,
too.
and you know what? We were helped by leaders in Iowa who kept constitutional amendments against same-sex marriage from
a
coming
single
up.
leader,
So
you're right.
so these things can be done.
And the Iowa judges who got ousted by the voters after they legalized same-sex marriage in what Ted Olson has called a brilliant decision. There was a great article about it in the Times in the last week. They really took it seriously, and they were not liberal judges, and sat down and looked at the issues dispassionately and decided there was no way they could exclude same-sex couples from marriage. And then 3 of them got fired by the voters. Those judges got a Profile and Courage Award from the Kennedy Institute in Boston.
And Caroline Kennedy, as I said, has come out for that platform plank in the Democratic platform, which would support same-sex marriage.
And John Boehner's little House of Representatives legal group has announced it will defend the Defense of Marriage Act in another case, the Service Members Legal Defense Network case.
Maybe Ken Mailman can have a talk with him, his friend John Boehner.
Yeah, exactly. This is legally married same-sex couples in the service do not get the same benefits as heterosexual married couples, so our side is suing. Begging Boehner not to defend DOMA, but his lawyer is after that again. But Representative Linda Sanchez, Democrat of California, has introduced the Social Security Equality Act for the second time. It was introduced 2 years ago, too, for equal survivor and pension benefits for same-sex couples under Social Security. Has 95 co-sponsors. Doesn't mean it'll get anywhere, but it's a nice idea.
Great. All right. Some other news.
A lot of school news, and the worst is a story out of Indianapolis where a young man, 17 years old, Dynasty Young,
an openly gay student, was going through severe bullying here at Arsenal Tech High School, cursed in the hallways, taunted with anti-gay slurs, followed him home from his bus stop, and on many occasions threw bottles and rocks at him while threatening to beat him up. So his mother, Chalisa Grimes, brought it to the attention repeatedly to the administrators.
Over and over and over again. The administrators said things like, well, we can't discipline the kids who are attacking you at the bus stop because that's not on school property.
And they sort of suggested that Dynasty was the cause, not the victim of his own bullying. You're going to walk around dressed like that, blah, 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 blah. You know, what the hell do you expect? So Mom bought him a stun gun for protection, and he took it to school, and when they were ganging up on him the next time, he fired it off into the air. Didn't do anything with it, but it was illegal to possess a stun gun and bring a weapon, and he's been expelled.
Well, the school, which couldn't manage to do a damn thing to help him for months and months and months when he was bullied, sprang into action when he fires a stun gun in the air. He is now expelled.
I remember in grade school, this is at a Catholic school on Long Island, there was a fat kid who was tortured every day. The other kids, I mean, I didn't participate in this, thank goodness, but, kids do this, and they were torturing him every day over being fat, and he rigged up, you know how you draw circles with a compass, with a point, with a ruler, and he just used it to try to keep people away from him.
Yeah.
He would be crying, and, it was just awful, and you got to be able to defend yourself. What happened to stand your ground?
Exactly. Stand your ground does not apply when you are LGBT and being attacked, evidently. Right. And there is another case exactly like that, same principle, in Minneapolis. Cece McDonald, we told you about her before when she was first arrested or put on trial. She is an African-American transgender woman, 23 years old. A pillar of the community, someone who was regarded as a role model and a helper to lots of people. And she and friends were walking in this area that was a little dicey and where there'd been problems before. And they were attacked by a group of bigoted white men who chased them down the street. Severely injured them. These guys were yelling, were attacking them physically, and Cece pulls out a pair of scissors to hold them off, and one guy runs into the scissors, dead. She is charged with second-degree manslaughter, takes the plea. She is now facing 3.5 years in prison.
For defending herself.
Defending herself. Meanwhile, guys get off with killing Trayvon Martin because of a stand your ground law.
Right.
But we defend ourselves.
Right.
And
who do we think we are?
Yeah.
And who does Keaton Fuller think he is? This kid is a senior at Prince of Peace Catholic School in Clinton, Iowa, and he won the Iowa's Matthew Shepard Scholarship. $40,000. And if you're going to get this scholarship, you've got to sign an agreement. The school has to sign an agreement. You're going to let the local foundation, it's called the Eychaner Foundation, Eychaner Foundation, you got to sign a thing saying you're going to let us present this thing to you at the graduation ceremony. And the school did. They didn't have a problem with it. But the bishop found out about this, and this is a group that advocates something against Catholic teaching. Bullying gays, is okay. So anyway, he's not being allowed to receive this thing at the graduation ceremony, but they said they are going to have a school assembly where he's going to be presented with it.
Good. Controversy in Lenoir City, Tennessee, where a high school teacher is under fire for letting a student write a little essay in the yearbook about it's okay to be gay and what he went through. Other adult school board members in the community are outraged about this. Newspaper editorials, how dare anybody write this publicly in the yearbook. And in Ohio, a transgender male student teacher was fired from his student teaching job because when the high school class he was working with started making fun of him, he stopped and started talking about who he was and what he'd been through. And he was accused of violating the code of ethics by talking about himself.
Outrageous. Well, if you're having trouble in Utah, the Pride Center there has set up what they're calling a hotline, a no-bullying hotline. We have a thing up on this, the number, 801-580-7680, or you can email the problems that you're having with bullying to nobully@utahpridecenter.org. But now it's going to be open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily, staffed by a trained staff member or a volunteer at the Pride Center. This is for Utah. And of course, if you're ever having any kind of problems around LGBT stuff and you're young, you can contact the Trevor Project.
And here's a good little model that might be helpful. In Santa Cruz, California, they are about to have the 15th annual Queer Youth Leadership Awards. People in the community got together 15 years ago and decided that these kids needed support and recognition, and not only the kids but their allies, and they started this thing called the Queer Youth Leadership Awards. And this Saturday, May 12th, they will be having it for the 15th year, and they've put up on their website some parameters or some models of how they do this and what they do. So if you go to QYLA, QueerYouthLeadershipAwards.org, you can get some information about what they do in Santa Cruz and find out about the ceremony. QYLA, I see the screen says QXLA, but it's QYLA.org with the awards. Thank you, they just changed it. This Saturday, May 12th.
Okay, and we've told you about that case of hazing, the hazing death of Robert Champion last fall. He was with the Florida A&M marching band, and he was hazed by some of his compatriots there, and 13 have been charged, criminally charged, in that hazing death. There's still a reluctance on the part of his parents, I think, to accept the fact that part of the reason that he was gone after was because he is gay.
And they're not murder charges, because it turns out that you can't charge 13 people with the murder. You have to be more specific with just one or two, so it's a lesser charge.
And in New York, hue and cry over of cuts of $7 million for runaway and homeless youth services in New York. It might eliminate 160 shelter beds in New York for homeless youth. But this is the kind of thing that we expect our Speaker Christine Quinn, who is getting married in a couple of weeks, to restore when the City Council gets their hands on the budget.
You're going to keep reminding people of her marriage. It's May 19th.
Yeah.
Thank you to San Diego Judge Joan Weber, who dismissed an entire jury saying that the prosecutor had erred by excluding a gay rights demonstrator from the case of protesters. She called it shocking that he would try to do this. And I've seen this happen in New York courts, too, where merely the fact that you have two gay people means you have to recuse yourself. I saw a gay lawyer recuse herself from being involved with gay demonstrators. It was insane.
The only time I was ever on the Charlie Rose Show was to talk about the exclusion of gay jurors about 100 years ago.
Well, San Diego judge is standing up for us.
All right.
We've lost a little track of the time, so if the control room could tell us where we stand in terms of time.
Just buzz in and tell us how much time we have. We would appreciate it.
In D.C., several stories. The mayor there, Vincent Gray, has appointed 2 transgender women to the Human Rights Commission. Excellent. And at American University in D.C., the retiring student body president, Sarah McBride, formerly Tim McBride, has come out as transgender in a very eloquent letter to the student body that got her a lot of support. And a longtime activist in D.C., Ruby Corrado, has opened Casa Ruby, which is going to be a new Latino-focused LGBT center, because the main LGBT center does not have enough Spanish-speaking people or Spanish-oriented services, although Ruby says that services at the new Casa Ruby will be for everybody.
May 22nd is Harvey Milk Day.
Ooh.
And it's going to be celebrated across the state of California, at least. We could be celebrating it here, too. But they're going to, the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus is going to be on the steps of the California Capitol in Sacramento, premiering a new anthem, Give 'Em Hope.
Okay.
That's among many other things that they're going to be doing.
The Federal Bureau of Prisons has announced that every prison will have an LGBT representative for the staff. That's a great little thing.
The Osage tribe has a transgender intersex candidate. We have a picture of her. Her name is Josie Tallchief, who was running for the Osage Congress, and she'd be the first out
in Oklahoma.
She'd be the first out transgender person there.
She says She had a revelation about her identity and need to re-identify herself 25 years ago watching the Joan Rivers show.
Yes, she did. She said she supports gay men and lesbians.
And Joe Biden says it's Will and Grace. No.
It's Joan Rivers.
It's a lot of things. The Empire State Pride agenda is in Albany this week, lobbying for the Gender Identity and Expression Act.
In New York,
non-discrimination.
in New York, they dedicated Harry Weeder Way. Harry Weeder was our friend, gay activist, AIDS activist, and disability rights activist.
And fantastic,
so they named
an intellectual dwarf.
Yes, as he said.
Yes. All right, international news. Certainly the election in France took all the headlines, and the new socialist president has promised to try to legalize same-sex marriage in France by next year.
So to do it, they have their parliamentary elections a month from now, and he's got to get a majority of the socialists in there in order to get that.
Yeah. Nikolai Alexeyev, the Russian activist, has been convicted of promoting gay propaganda in St. Petersburg. He's the first of the activists arrested there to be put on trial. He's fined $170. He's carrying a sign saying homosexuality is not a perversion. He will appeal this conviction.
Terrible news from Honduras, where Eric Martinez, who was a leader of the Movement of Diversity and Resistance and political organization down there, was found assassinated on Monday.
Which happens a lot in Honduras.
Well, and he was had been selected as a candidate for the for a parliament seat from the Popular Refoundation Force Party.
Out gay activist, journalist also. He was beaten, strangled, suffocated, awful story.
And this is why we have the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia, which is May 17th every year. And this year, there was a statement, a recorded statement that we're going to show you now, from Navi Pillay, who was the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Now, I didn't know about Ms. Pillay's background. She was an anti-apartheid lawyer for like 30 years down there in South Africa. She was the first woman of color to be appointed to the South African High Court, and we have a video from her about this.
All over the world, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people of all ages face harassment and discrimination at work, at home, at school, and in many other everyday situations. In many countries, national laws are skewed against them. In some 76 states, having a partner of the same sex is a criminal offense. People are being arrested, singled out for physical attack, being tortured, even killed, just for being in a loving relationship. When I raise these issues, some complain that I'm pushing for new rights or special rights for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. But there is nothing new or special about the right to life and security of person, the right to freedom from discrimination. These and other rights are universal, enshrined in international law, but denied to many of our fellow human beings simply because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. We cannot let these abuses stand. We know what needs to be done. States must repeal discriminatory laws and ban discriminatory practices. Punish violence and hatred, not love. And we should all challenge homophobic attitudes. The best antidote is education for children and adults alike. Reach out, talk, learn, and help make our world safer and better for everyone. This is an historic moment. More and more states recognize the need for action and are speaking up, including here at the United Nations. With your help and the support of millions of people who believe in universal human rights, we will secure equal rights for every last one of us.
Very encouraging to hear that so clearly from the United Nations. I mean, Mary Robinson held that position and was also very pro-gay, but this was really sharp and great.
They've been doing a lot of good stuff for several years. I just wanted to make one note about a story you mentioned last week about how Iran was freaked out at the prospect of a gay parade in Azerbaijan next door. What you didn't mention is that the reason there is going to be a gay parade there in Baku is because they won the Eurovision Song Contest last year, which therefore comes to them this year. And that's a very gay event, and it's actually something that has promoted discussion of LGBT rights around the world as this moves to different locales, like Will and Grace. It is a vehicle for this conversation, and it is upsetting the Iranians, and who are calling it an insult to all Shiites and
well, you know, we're on there too.
Plot by Zionists.
We're on there too. All you have to do is tune into the internet, and you can watch us.
Exactly, but it's actually a very substantive thing that may take place. And the guys arrested on the gay cruise ship in Dominica have admitted having sex outdoors on their balcony. They say they thought they couldn't be seen. They were 6 stories up. They were 600 yards from shore. Trust me.
Telephoto lens.
Yeah. So anyway, AIDS news.
All right. Well, just another long article in Scientific American about the return of drug-resistant gonorrhea. And this is I read the whole piece, and the interesting thing is it seems to have come from a strain in Japan because a lot of the cases are linked there. And it's just, you know, immune to all these drugs, but if they don't, this is another reason for getting, you know, practicing safe sex, because if this thing gets out of control, we have nothing to fight it with.
Terrible little story from Washington that I'm sure has escaped most people's notice, but it turns out that the Health and Human Services Department keeps a list of approved sex ed programs that are eligible for federal funding.
So now they funded an abstinence-only program from something called RH Reality Check.
Heritage Keepers.
Heritage Keepers, which has no proven effectiveness, no impact on sexual abstinence or activity, relies on messages of fear and shame.
Says girls should dress modestly to not provoke lust in boys. It offers no information about condoms or contraception. It reinforces homophobia. It fantasizes about heterosexual marriage in completely retrograde terms. It condemns cohabitation, sex outside of marriage, says that they will cause STDs. It is this horrible program, which, as you said, has no evidence of efficacy.
I'm sorry. RH Reality Check, of course, the group that found out about this and is bringing it to our attention. I apologize for that. But this is just right-wing claptrap, and it has to be stopped. So we should be writing to the administration. I mean, I thought we were doing well. Well, you know, you've also got HHS, you know, not allowing the morning after pill, right? You know,
horrible stuff. There is no constituency for this that would support Obama.
Well,
That's
you know,
crazy.
A lot of this abstinence-only stuff started under President Clinton.
It's later now.
Okay.
And the Bloomberg administration here, in addition to cutting funding for LGBT homeless youth, has done its usual budget cuts for homeless people with AIDS. This is the annual dance. Will the city council restore the funding? Blah, 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 blah. And congratulations to Lisa Lampanelli, who got kicked off Celebrity Apprentice, but not before raising $130,000 for GMHC as her charity. And we want to remind you that the annual GMHC AIDS Walk is coming up on May 20th. You can go to their website, gmhc.org, for
They've got
more information.
40,000 people marching, for God's sakes.
And good for Lisa for raising that money.
I don't know about going on a show with Donald Trump, but, you know, all right.
Okay.
It's for a good cause.
I can't argue that with you.
It's for a good cause.
Yeah. Oh, and sorry, I should have done this earlier. Coming up May 30th in Dallas, the ExxonMobil shareholders meeting, where once again we will try to get them to adopt a sexual orientation and gender identity and expression non-discrimination.
One of them used to have it, and when they merged, they got rid of it.
Mobil had it. Exxon bought them. Exxon got rid of all benefits, all non-discrimination rules. Now they say, oh, don't worry, we have internal policies about this. As Dan Savage would say, nonsense.
Well, Romney says he doesn't discriminate, but I guess he does.
Yeah.
All right, entertainment news.
Yeah.
Well, some sad news from the entertainment world, and that's the death of Maurice Sendak,
83 years
author
old,
of Where the
stroke.
Wild Things Are in the Night. He was 83. Yeah, I
And
mean,
my personal favorite, The Nutshell Library, Alligators All Around, Chicken Soup with Rice.
Right, and he
One
did-
was
and he-
Johnny, Pierre.
he did set design as well.
Look at The Nutshell Library.
Very famous guy, but you know, he did an interview with the Times in 2008, and they said, was there anything he had never been asked? And he paused, and then he said, well, then I'm gay. I just didn't think it was anybody's business. He lived with a man for 50 years.
Eugene Glynn, a psychiatrist who died in 2007. But a couple of things.
He said, all I wanted to be is straight so my parents could be happy.
He never told his parents.
Well, he says they never knew. Well, parents have a way of knowing these things, you know, Maurice.
But the other thing he said was that he did not want to jeopardize his career as a children's book author in the 50s, and that could have made him not publishable.
Became a good close friend of Tony Kushner's towards the end there.
Yes, they worked on a project together, Brundabar, about Holocaust issues.
Mm-hmm.
It was a book and became a opera.
One of our viewers, Chris Albertson, wrote a biography of Bessie Smith that is
40 years ago.
that is now being inducted and deals with her lesbianism and is being inducted to
Bisexuality.
the Blues. Yes, excuse me, bisexuality. The Blues Foundation Hall of Fame
In Memphis.
In Memphis.
Yeah. All right. Queen Latifah, I'll give you the Broadway stuff, but Queen Latifah is going to, for the first time, headline a Pride Fest in Long Beach, California on May 19th, and people are saying, oh, she's come out. Well, her statement doesn't actually say that, but she may by the time she gets there.
Good. And Charles Hyam died, who was 81. He wrote a lot of trashy celebrity biographies.
They were good.
Including asserting that Howard Hughes had a romance with Cary Grant, and that Howard Hughes quite possibly died of AIDS. But he had a longtime partner, Richard Palafox, who died 2 years ago.
Have you read about E.L. Doctorow's new book?
No.
Completely transgender, cross-dressing, gay, all over the place. Sounds fascinating.
Well,
all right, you have a minute and a half to do
Well, I'll be
Broadway
brief about the
reviews.
theater. As I said, everybody said how awful Leap of Faith was, the worst reviewed show of the year, and therefore it wasn't so bad comparison. I mean, it wasn't good. It's going to close on Sunday. I'm not recommending you buy a ticket. And Nice Work If You Can Get It, which is one of those Gershwin pastiche things with Matthew Broderick and Kelly O'Hara.
Love Kelly O'Hara.
Pretty plodding.
I'm sure.
Although, if you hang in there for the end, Elaine Stritch comes on as Matthew's mom at the end. And the best thing I saw was, and we can put a picture up of it, is The Caretaker out at this is Pinter's. This is the play that made Pinter back in 1960. Now it's about a depressive, a manic, and a psychotic homeless person in a shabby room in London.
A friend of mine went to a 20-minute Pinter play once. I said, how was it? She said, too long.
It can be. But this one is cracklin' good, and I recommend if you can, pay for a seat close to the stage. Not because you can't hear them, but because Jonathan Pryce, who is the star of this thing, is the homeless guy, uses a very eccentric accent.
Our best wishes to Josh Dixon, a U.S. gymnast who's trying to make the Olympics and has come out and may be the first out gay U.S. gymnast.
Olympian.
If he makes it. But he's got some more competitions to go. Thank you again, Corey Johnson, for sitting in for me last week.
And thank you all for watching. And if you want to be on our email list, write to me at andyhom@aol.com.
See you next week.